Hello Reddit readers. Today we have incredibly interesting stories on the timeline. I will not detain you anymore. Like and subscribe to the channel of pleasant viewing. Story 1 from user Summonik92. Used to work in a musical instrument shop, pianos in the window. A single file path to the counter that went through about 20 pianos and keyboards. The counter is a giant novelty guitar amp with guitars hung on every free inch of wall space. Lady comes in, trips over a couple of piano stools. In her rage-filled stomp over to the counter, slams a receipt on the counter, and immediately starts shouting. Conversation was as follows, lady. I ordered this TV 4 weeks ago and it's still not arrived. What sort of business are you running here? Me, well, that must be frustrating for you. But I'm sorry to say we sell instruments, not TVs. I think you're looking for the Sony shop a couple of doors down the road, lady. So you're calling me a liar. I bought a $500 TV from this shop. 4 weeks ago, I'm not stupid. I can see the TV on the wall. Me, so that single TV is the one we use to monitor CCTV and let customers know they're on camera. We have a lot of issues with theft and stock loss. Again, I think you want to be talking to Sony staff. The shop is like 50 meters down the road. And your receipt says Sony. This is not Sony. We don't sell Sony items here. We sell guitars and pianos. Lady, where is your manager? I was in the shop 4 weeks ago, and one of you sold me a TV that hasn't showed up. There were TVs on the wall like that, and speakers, like those you have over there. You're a liar, and you're calling me a liar, or stupid. Either way, I want my refund. Now me? Well, I am the manager. I have worked here for 4 years and can guarantee you we have never sold a TV to yourself or anybody else. You're being rude and you need to leave. Now, best part is, she threw the receipt at me, and a couple racist slurs stormed out. She comes back in 5 minutes later and starts shouting whilst I'm helping an actual customer. Where did you put my receipt? You stole it, didn't you? I pulled her receipt out the bin, as it was just resting on top, gave it back to her, and gave her a sickly sweet smile. So did you find the correct shop on the end? Or are you just going up and down the road berating random shop workers? She got a bit dumbfounded and just stood with her mouth moving, but no sound coming out. So I held the door open, pointed at the giant Sony sign visible from the doorway. That is the Sony shop, by the way. Good luck. Story 2 from user Violet Jade. I was waiting for my food at McDonald's and it was packed, very busy. This one couple had come in after me, and they were peeved about how long food was taking. Understandable, but the folks behind the counter were working as hard as they could. I always stopped by at this McDonald's, and the staff was always so happy whenever I or another customer was polite. They were delightful folks that would bend over backwards to help if you showed the most basic human decency. This guy didn't. The couple was young, I'd guess in their early 20s. The guy was short and white, and the girl was taller and black. Normally, that wouldn't be relevant. Several of the folks who worked there, including a couple managers, were Latino. Specifically, the manager who was working that day near front counter was this middle-aged lady who would stuff in some more fries or accidentally put in an extra nugget when customers were friendly. A couple others at the front counter were also Latino. At the time, well, this little guy didn't like that. He stormed up to the counter, holding up the line to loudly and angrily demand to know why his food wasn't ready. Yet the clerk apologized, stating that the kitchen was moving as fast as possible and that his food would be ready soon. That wasn't good enough for him. He demanded a manager. So the shift manager came up and asked how she could help him. He went on the same tirade, and she at first told him his food would be ready. Soon, he continued to shout at her and eventually said, "How come none of you speaks English?" Mind you, some of the staff had accents that would reveal English wasn't their first language, but they were speaking perfectly. He insisted they couldn't understand them, demanding, "Get me a mother who speaks English." The manager tells him that if he's going to continue to disturb the restaurant like that, she's going to have to ask him to leave. He gets even more angry, pointing to another manager. A black man in the back, shouting, "Get me." Him. The American. Get the Americano. It was at this point that for the first time in my life, I actually interrupted someone who was being terrible. Hell, usually I can't even think to defend myself when I'm being attacked verbally. But something about the way he said Americano really pissed me off. So with the same politeness I try to show when I order food, I firmly said, "Excuse me, sir. I don't think there's any need to be racist here." He looked at me like I'd slapped him with a dueling glove when I saw him open his mouth. I smiled despite myself because I knew what he was going to say. "I'm not being racist," he insisted. Then he froze, refusing to say the next words that had come to his mind. "That's right," I thought smugly to myself. "Do it. Tell me that you can be racist against Latinos because your girlfriend is black." Fortunately, for all parties involved, I might be a tall woman with a bit of muscle and more fat on me, but I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be hard to get my ass kicked. His girlfriend took the opportunity to ask him to wait outside before the store called the cops. On the pair of them, everyone around me looked at me like speaking up was a mistake. Like I somehow wasn't allowed to call him racist for mocking and berating Latino folks. Of course, just like me, and just like the guy, the whole crowd was white, so maybe that had something to do with it. That sure was satisfying. But I wish the dude had kept his dumbass mouth shut in the first place. Story 3 from user JMach1, literally yesterday at church. So to recap, we were having a church board meeting with all the members to go over the hiring of a new pastor. The pastor is pretty great, keeps the messages short, has good rapport with the younger crowd, and she's our first female pastor. Now this comes very recently after the Lutheran Council has publicly stated that LGBTQ individuals are welcomed in church and can marry, which is pretty good. However, we had a certain member of our church who no one has seen for a while. Well, just call him Kirk. Now the meeting has barely started, and we're all pretty elated that we're getting a new pastor after 2 years of temporary assignments. Everyone is also happy because we had some good donuts and coffee. Seriously. The coffee was amazing, tasted like local roast stuff. Everyone was happy. Except Kirk. No. Kirk is seething. Even before the chairman finished with his opening states about why we're there, Kirk stands up and demands some time to speak. Being that he is a member, despite not being at church. For a time, we all agree, we value the input of our members, but not Kirk. The minute after he introduces himself, he goes straight into the pure vitriol. He starts saying that the entire Lutheran Council is wrong for allowing pedophiles and homosexuals into our church, and that it was against the Old Testament to be for gay marriage, and that it was of the devil. Everyone was shocked at the openness of hatred he showed to our members, including the chairman. The chairman gets over his shock and informs Kirk that the conversation isn't appropriate for the setting. Kirk claims it is, to which the entire congregation shouts, "No." I was very proud of the conversation, but Kirk will not stop talking even when asked by the chairman. So I decide to step up. I let Kirk know that the conversation isn't appropriate as the discussion is on the pastor's selection, rather than the teachings of the Lutheran Council. His entire conversation is out of line for parliamentary procedure, except Kirk is not having any of it and doubles down at his comments. To which I shot back, point of order. This conversation is strictly about the selection of our pastor. Any conversation about the organization of the Lutheran Church is outside the scope of this meeting and is invalid. Kirk refused to give up his time. So finally, I say, "This relinquish your time." Kirk turned around to face me, and it pissed. He asked me if I wanted to go out back and settle this. Yes, you heard right. He threatened to hit me in church in the chapel where the congregation was. The ushers quickly came over and asked Kirk to leave, and everyone was shocked. For a second time, long story short, the pastor is elected unanimously, and she is now our pastor. Everyone was pretty happy after the meeting that not only did we get a new pastor, but that the entire congregation was very vocally in support of our LGBTQ neighbors and friends. It honestly made me very proud. Story 4 from user Quickie243. I worked at a vet, and this guy drove up to our door behind him. 2 police cars, lights on, and everything blocking him in on our parking lot. So I was a bit nervous since I was alone at the office at that time, and only 19. I think he got out of his car casually and entered. And the policemen got out of their cars too, but stayed outside. He greeted me friendly enough and told me he wanted to buy some meds for his dog. I was like, okay, great. What's your name? Trying to ignore the fact he drove up with his own police escort. He told me a woman's name, but couples often only have one account. So I didn't think anything of it. I pulled up the name, and in the notes, it said they were not allowed to come back again because they've failed to pay. Multiple times, have threatened the vet and tried to scam us on multiple occasions by opening new accounts. Basically, there's a history of former addresses they've used in the past. They owed us a couple $1,000 at that point. So I told him, sorry, I can't sell you anything due to the debt. He went on and on about how it wasn't in his name. But the name of his girlfriend, it wasn't his account. He didn't have any debt with us. It wasn't his fault. His girlfriend couldn't handle money. I tried to explain to him that I wasn't allowed to sell him anything on this account and asked if he had his own. By chance, he did. He still didn't tell me his name. Though I was like, your dog isn't listed here. I'm not allowed to sell you anything without confirming. The dog has been seen by the vet, and that the meds are for this specific dog anyways. So why don't you just tell me your name, sir? And he got angry and told me loudly. He just wanted to buy something, waved some money in my face, and leant over the counter. And I was just like, I understand. Just tell me your name, so I can look up your dog. Then he yelled at me that he'd pay some of his girlfriend's debt if he had to, and I was just trying to look at the police outside of the window to see if they saw what was happening. They weren't paying any attention, so I was apprehensive and told him no, just because I had a bad feeling about him. I told him we'd send her another invoice and he could pay that. Then, if he wanted to help her out, one of the vets drove into the parking lot, then came in, saw the police and this guy yelling in my face and was like, whoa, what's going on here? I tried to explain to him, but I was a bit lost too. The guy at this point was super frustrated, yelling, trying to walk through the door to enter behind the counter, but it was stuck. So I was like knocking on the window to alert the police, chilling outside. They came in. He was still raging. They took him outside. One of the policemen stayed with us as I tried to explain what happened to him. And my boss, the policeman, goes, oh well, good thing you didn't tell him the address of his ex-girlfriend then. And it turns out he was this crazy stalker who just wanted me to print him a receipt because that would have had his girlfriend's new address on it. And I was just like, and you just let him walk in here alone. WTF. Story 5 from user NextPLs. I work in a women's shelter in my state. It's for women only, and we've had cis men try to get in, claiming they've transitioned from female to male. We can tell when it's legit and when it's just a cis man trying to get in. As we have a heavy screening process, and usually they'll have an interview where they end up admitting it to one of the male staff members and then try to plead their case. Never works the moment we find out you lied to us to get in the program. We can let you in for the safety of all of our guests. Now that is a common occurrence, but what is not common is people walking up to our door. Our doors have a number lock, and one of our ladies was sitting outside in our smoking area. The smoking area is across the parking lot from the only entrance to our part of the building and has a pretty clear view of the door as I'm working on a puzzle with some of our other guests. It being a weekend, we try to do fun things to keep up everyone's spirits. We get a phone call. I answer, and it's from my girls sitting outside smoking. A strange man is at the door and they can tell he's trying to get in the building. I put on my biggest mama bear face, keep the phone on me, and walk outside. This man immediately tries to take the door from my hands to hold it open. I am not about to let that happen. And I did a lot of weightlifting in high school though. I'm short. I'm far from small. I yank the door back and it closes, so he can get in, and I ask him if I can help him with anything. This dude goes off telling me he's the Messiah, he's crazy horse reincarnated, that any who refuse to help him will go to hell when he begins the rapture, that the government is trying to silence him, and that they, I don't know who they are, beat him up and stole his entire identity, and that his leg was broken. But he used his Messiah powers to heal himself. He's got a bottle of whiskey in his hands, and he's obviously either mentally ill or on some kind of mind-altering drugs. Since he mentioned the broken leg, I offered to call an ambulance for him, and he said yes, and continued to rant during the 911 call. You could just tell. I was so tired, trying to explain the situation to the operator. Police came because he started getting violent with the paramedics. One of them was a trans woman. He kept intentionally misgendering and telling her she was a sin in God's eyes, and that he was the Messiah. Anyway, once police came, my job was done. Just had to get a card from the officer and write down an incident report since it occurred on property. The ironic part, we're located in an old Christian church, very common for shelters in my area. And this man told police he was there to get his identity back from the government. In there, those ladies work for the government, and they stole my identity. Ironically, we don't work directly for the government. We've been fighting to keep our program afloat, because we're one of the few shelters that accepts trans women with cis women. And if we go down there, won't be a safe place for all those women to go. We're not even close to looking like a government building. Nor are we anywhere near town hall or the courthouse. The man just wandered onto our property and happened to find a shelter for homeless women. Sad part is, I know this area all too well. He probably spent a night in the drunk tank and got let go. He won't receive the mental help he probably needs, and he'll continue to be homeless and probably get severely hurt one of these days. Despite being annoyed with the situation, I still feel bad for the man. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and write comments. See you later.